Welcome to the Data Playbook podcast. In this podcast, we aim to help data leaders be successful with data. We do that through a series of interviews with experts, practitioners, and other data leaders. The topic of today is data and sustainability. And for that, I have with me no one less than Geert Verstraeten. Geert, welcome to the Data Playbook podcast. Can you maybe start by introducing yourself?
Okay, yeah, thanks. First of all, Chris, thanks for having me. It's very nice to have this conversation with you. And to hear your introduction is a little bit scary as well, to be honest, for different reasons, or I'm excited at least. First of all, it's hard to consider yourself an expert in something. Secondly, I really don't consider myself a sustainability expert. On the other hand, it has become part of my path. Who am I? I'm Geert Verstraeten. I spent 20 years in data. Most of that time in data science. So I have a theoretical background, if you will. I did a PhD in data science in the very early days between 2001 and 2005. And then I started a small company, which was called Python Predictions, where we basically did a lot of data science cases. And at some point, we got integrated into a larger story. So we sold the company. We became part of a larger team, which was a lot of fun. And that company was sold again. And at some point, I had the feeling that it was no longer the path that I had chosen. And I decided to start over, let's say, to take some time to figure out what I wanted to do. And that was one of those moments where I had the idea that sustainability should probably be a bigger part of my focus than the focus that I had been choosing before.
Okay. And so then you decided to join a new startup called the Data Forest. Can you talk a bit about what is the Data Forest and what is the problem you guys are solving?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Data Forest is a small company in Hasselt, so in the east of Belgium, started by Michiel Mechelmans.
Yeah.
And Michiel has a big background in financial reporting and business intelligence, so BI dashboarding. And he started a company in 2022. Basically to do BI in a nice way, so he's fully aware of all the technologies and tools, and we're fully aligned with what is happening in the field. But also with the mission that a company can do a little bit more than just be profitable. So from the very first hour that Michiel worked for his own company at the Data Forest, he started planting 5 trees through project Trees for the Future.
Okay.
For every billable hour, and that has been going on since the start in 2022. So we're counting 50,000 trees.
50,000 trees by now
already. Wow. Yeah, for a small company. So it's really part of the idea that we can. It's not or. We try to think of end solutions. So it's not profit or the world. We try to combine being profitable and a growing company, an ambitious company, with doing something useful.
And so how does that happen? Do you one day wake up and decide, like, today I'm going to care about sustainability? Or how did that work for you?
Yeah, to be honest, if I think about it, there's a voice in my head that was shouting the whole time and that I was able to quiet for a long time.
Yeah.
In the early days of my career, so for my PhD, I had to work hard. There was a period with a moment with easy periods, but a moment with stress deadline stress as well. And then afterwards, we started our own business, so that was really hard. So we worked 24/7. I didn't meet my wife yet, so I was fully focused on work. And suddenly, one week, I stopped talking. I crashed. I had no idea where that was coming from. I went to my grandmother's place and I stayed in her couch for a week. She fed me. She never asked me any questions. And after a week, I gently started talking to people again. And I had the idea that I was not fully committed to what I should be committed to. First of all, I worked on meeting more people, and I eventually met my wife, and that made a big difference to think of something bigger than myself, or the job that I was doing. But also in that time, I found back a list of the companies that I wanted to work more for, and they were non-profit companies, so they had a bigger impact in the world. So, and at different moments when I had difficult switches, like recently when I quit the run that I was on for 18 years, you start to question things. And at those moments, you think, have I done enough, or could I have done something different with my time?
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that I now only make good choices, but it's much more conscious in my mind than it used to.
I think you're being very humble there, like saying I'm not really a data expert and I'm not sure I made the right choices. But the fact is that you're one of the pioneers in data in Belgium, right? I remember when we started 11 years ago, you were already like an institutional value, almost like Python predictions. They are successful with data, right? So how are they doing it? And it's interesting to see that you've had this growth from startup to scale up to enterprise, and now back to startup, right? So in a way, you're starting from scratch. And I wonder, what are you doing differently now versus when you started, 20 years ago by now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because that was also a big change for me. To be honest, I did become very comfortable in my role. So I was in a very comfortable seat. I didn't have to leave. People enjoyed my presence, I think, and I had the feeling that I have the impact on the people in terms of coaching them and helping them realize stuff that I had learned before. And when I stepped out of that role, it was because I was missing something of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I took some time to reflect and decided to join Michiel, but also for me, that was a big change to start again in a small organization. And the data forest is really interesting. We're 50-50 on experts versus juniors. So we have 3 people with above 10 years of experience and 3 people with below 3 years of experience, something like that.
Okay.
And so that's an interesting shift. But also, I think, and we've talked about this before, I think young people are to some extent smarter than we were 20 years ago. And so
in which way?
When I arrived at the data forest, I thought I could do a number of things that would mean huge impact. And to be honest, they were pretty good or pretty well organized.
Yeah.
And so they had already figured out a lot of stuff. Of course, Michiel started the company with a lot of experience. Walter and I, we started our own startup in 2006, coming straight out of university or our PhDs. So that was very different. It took us a long time to learn the basic stuff.
So you were never, let's say, a real employee before being an employer?
No, and that was a big disadvantage. So we never started with a big consultancy firm. Yeah. We invented everything ourselves, which was a lot of fun. And not ourselves. With the whole team, fortunately, we realized after a couple of years that probably the worst way to run this would be that every idea should come from us.
Yeah.
So we promoted a culture where everybody could step up.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. But yes, we had to invent it all. And obviously, when we attracted people from bigger companies, we always asked them, please tell us what you learned in your previous context that would help us. But we always made sure that it would work for our organization, not just because everybody else was doing it.
Yeah, I see.
And some of those systems and some of those ideas, I had been talking to Michiel for quite some time before joining. And so some of the ideas were already very nicely implemented into the data forest. So it was not always, I was searching in the first quarter that I had now also for where can I best make impact
Yeah.
And that meant also that I needed to work again on skills that I was not working on.
Like what?
Well, it's really funny. I had this discussion recently with a very good business oriented data analyst,
Yeah.
where I said, yeah, please watch your tech skills, and a very good technically oriented analyst, where I said, please watch your soft skills. And it's for me, it's like doing legs day or skipping legs day in the fitness.
Yeah.
You can do it, but you will look a little bit ridiculous
Yes.
if you do it.
But you can skip it once or twice, but not for a year or two.
Exactly. And my leg days were working on sales.
Yeah.
I liked coaching people always a lot more than putting our message out there. So it doesn't necessarily bring me a lot of energy. Or it's not a typical thing when I get up that I say I need to start calling people and say we want to work for them.
Yeah.
And obviously, with our ambition in the data force, that's needed. That I do that again, and I discovered again that I actually enjoy it, but I need some practice. Yeah. So the skills that you don't work on, they're not as good as the skills that you worked on.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, I can definitely relate because, well, as you know, we've been working with the data force for a while now. Even before you joined the data force, I also met Michiel from the very beginning. He knows what he wants, right? He's very, very target oriented. It's always a pleasure to work with them. So it's cool to see that you bring your 20 years of experience to the game as well. I think what makes you different, in my words, is that what I like about the data force is you're no nonsense, right? What you see is what you get. So if we collaborate on a project, we can always predict what is the outcome going to be. The other thing that makes you stand out is, of course, your focus on sustainability. But then very practically, can you walk me through it? Like, how can a data team be more sustainable? Like, should we buy less throwaway cups of coffee, or should we write different algorithms? What does a sustainable data team look like? Right?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question. And you can go as far as you want to go. Something when I arrived in January, I don't think anybody in the team was really comfortable to position themselves really in sustainability, because it's such a big word that it's a little bit scary. Also, for me personally, it's a little bit scary to say this is our focus now. But when I look at what we're trying to do, it is different than what other companies are doing.
Yeah.
I think the biggest impact we can make is through the work that we do, the type of projects and the clients that we work for. So that's the first and most important thing I think we can realize impact for through is by selecting the right clients and by selecting the right projects to work on.
Okay.
That's certainly the biggest thing. And then the small stuff works as well, but the small stuff is making sure that you build sustainable data products. I can certainly elaborate a little bit on that. But I'm certainly not claiming that we have all the solutions either. I see that we're making different decisions than other companies are making, but it doesn't mean that we always go with public transport, or nobody in the team takes a plane when they go to to their holidays. So we're not extreme. We were actually inspired by a startup from Leuven. It's not a startup anymore. It's a marketing agency from Leuven, Static. Who selected that path already, if I'm not mistaken, in 2008. Said, okay, we're still going to build websites and do the marketing stuff, but we're going to focus on sustainability, having a positive impact on the world in the larger sense. And I've been very fortunate to receive some time from the founder, Pieter Jelle de Bru.
Yeah.
And we spent some time discussing on what that actually means for them. And it's never black and white. You can always make one step forward. But in some decisions, you can make a lot of difference. The things that they are doing, for example, if they build websites, they make sure that they don't put large images that just spend resources without adding value. So they compress their images. They wonder whether they should put trackers on everything because it uses resources. and people often don't look at them. So maybe they use trackers for a limited while, or they challenge whether it should be on every page and stuff like that. So we try to translate that into a data context, and you end up with pretty common stuff that is, first of all, build products and not one-offs. So if you do something, try to make sure that it lasts the test of time. That you develop it as if you would develop a product, so that you document it well enough. One of the biggest diseases in data projects is, I think, that nobody likes to do documentation, perhaps in development at large.
Absolutely.
So we want to be the company that does spend time on documentation, even if the project time has run out. We have a certain dignity or drive or commitment. Maybe commitment is the best word, to make sure that we leave something behind that will last if somebody changes seats.
So for you, a sustainable data product is not only having positive impact on the environment or reduce the impact you have on the environment, but it's also building data products that last and don't end up with, in BI, for instance. I think the biggest example of that in BI is every company I know, they have 1,000 BI reports they never ever look at, right? So for you, it's as much like building data products that last and that can also run when you and your team leaves, but also on the other side, like reduce your footprint with building the data product. Is that a good summary?
Absolutely. In our first team, we always started from the ROI perspective. Is there business value? So, and we were pretty hard on that. We never really jumped into a case where we really didn't understand how that was creating money for the client. So we kept on pushing in the project definition to understand how is this really going to build some tangible value before we jump into the project. So that was really embedded in our first team.
Yeah.
And now the question is, how is this going to do something useful? So if you're going to build the extra dashboard that nobody looks up at anyway, why do it? And suddenly, indeed, due to the nature of the analysts and maybe the excitement of business, you usually end up with data products that are just a little bit more complex than you would need or want. And making them more complex usually means also that people get lost faster. So that at some point they don't survive as long enough than if you make them nice and clean. So it's about accepting the right challenges, I think. Not making the problem bigger than it should be, using appropriate resources. We see a lot of companies setting up infrastructure like they are Facebook or Google, but a lot of companies in Belgium are not Facebook or Google. So do you really need that type of stuff? I know that you guys think about that as well. Do you really need real-time monitoring, or is that absolutely a requirement for this case? So there's a lot about that, but it's a really huge topic there also is adoption.
Yes, which is often overlooked in the data world. Often data people think my pipeline is running, my dashboard is up, my job is done. And then basically your job only starts once it's live, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. But a lot of the energy of good analytical people lies in the discovery phase, in the analytical phase. Yeah. And so figuring out what is the root cause of this thing that we're seeing. And then their attention shifts to a new problem.
Yeah.
And wrapping that up. And we see it so often that not only with consultants, but also with people on the client side, that there is some excitement about the project, but the energy of really embedding it in the organization drops before it's really adopted. And so we're creating a lot of stuff that's actually not used, which is not very mindful of the resources that we're using.
Well, that's very interesting, because I see the same at the projects we're doing. I always say all engineers love to build new stuff. Not a lot of engineers like to run and maintain existing stuff, right? Yeah. And that's not even talking about adoption. The moment something is in production, it's considered legacy. It's like, oh, can I move to a next new thing? And I think that's not sustainable, not just in terms of environmental impact, but it's not sustainable for a company. Like if you keep on adding and adding new stuff to it, but you never take away. That's one thing actually that there's a difference between, before we started the podcast, we said about producing physical goods. When you have a physical goods factory or a coffee shop or whatever, you cannot add more stuff to it because your physical space is limited. So you have some natural constraints on what you build. That's not true in the data world. As long as you have a budget, you can add more stuff to it, right? But that's not necessarily the answer. It's very easy to add stuff. It's not harder to remove stuff and to maintain stuff, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And on the other hand, we saw, I've had plenty of conversations with people where they said, we did a really nice analysis and that was not used, and it's very frustrating.
Yes.
That often came back 1 year, 2 years after the project. In a formal feedback session, they said, and what I really am sorry about is that stuff that we did a really beautiful job and it was never used. And so I had an interesting conversation yesterday with a big client who said, we're doing a lot of cool stuff and the business doesn't seem to care about it. We need more people to be more enthusiastic, and so we need some data evangelization in our company to drive the message. And I'm not sure. I don't have all the context to see whether that's true, but I think it's also useful to have some data translation. So if you're building stuff that you think is cool, but the business doesn't care, maybe it's useful to spend a little bit more time on understanding what the business really cares about, because obviously they're going to adopt and embrace stuff easier if they really like what has been done. So we focus at the data force more than other companies, I think, on really being really close to the business and understanding what is actually needed and challenging what is needed, and only then start building. So we were probably a little bit slower into building stuff.
Yeah.
But we spend more time into understanding stuff.
And it's scary because you're completely right. It's scary if you think about it you've been in data for 20 years now. I've been in data for 11 years. In those 1 or 2 decades, everything changed in terms of technology and algorithms and capabilities. At the same time, nothing has changed. Right?
Absolutely.
You also mentioned that to me the other day that if you look back of the gap between data and business, or data teams and business teams, and the change management that is needed, and the adoption, and also the skills within business to use data in the right way. If you're really being honest, we didn't make a lot of steps forward, right? As an industry, right?
No, absolutely. And it's all human problems, I think. Indeed, the technology is completely different and evolves faster and faster. So you need to be able to handle that speed. And the common solution is juniors usually have the energy to follow that pace, and people at our age,
we're at that spot already. People our age
are happy to have a mixed team. Let's say, it depends. It depends on your mindset, obviously. But I don't follow everything as fast as our junior colleagues do. But indeed. There's 2 sides of this: the management side and the analytical side, if you will, or the technical side. For the analytical/technical side, the challenges remain the same, in my opinion. So these people are people that like to build something of good quality. Yeah. They put themselves away in a room and they like to be undisturbed to finish their product, and only at the end they will show something to business. So for them, usually the challenge is starting to speak up sooner and really work on the soft skills, so they understand at each point of the project, are they still working on the right stuff? Is this still the progress that others find useful as well? So developing the soft skills is really an important part and remains to be for a lot of analytically oriented people. From management side, it has quite switched from 20 years ago. We had to convince people that data could be used for something. It was not even used in marketing that much.
If you think about it now, that's absurd because everybody wants to do something with data.
It's amazing. Right? Yeah. We were working for a big bank, and in 2008, we had to convince them that it was useful to define target groups based on data.
Wow.
So we had a big experiment. I think 8 campaigns designed by people, creatives, and 8 campaigns designed by data. And we came to the conclusion that the campaigns driven by data were consistently good.
Yeah.
People also have extremely creative ideas, sometimes even better. But there was a consistency in the data approach, which so nowadays the average marketing manager understands that data is a big part of their role. But nowadays there's a lot of inflated expectations. So the key thing that has remained the same is managing expectations, trying to make sure that management has the right expectation, not too modest, not exaggerated, about what will be the exact outcome of a certain project or product, so that they can estimate how useful this will become for them.
I think that's even harder today because we're in the age of ChatGPT, and every manager has tried ChatGPT by now, and they see how easy it is to get a result. And it's true. I love tools like ChatGPT, and it's a wonderful new capability that we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. At the same time, there's also super overinflated expectations with those technologies, right? And maybe also coming back to sustainability, this is not just a simple random forest algorithm that runs on your laptop for 2 hours. This is something that eats a lot of compute resources. Yes. So I wonder how you look at those large language models.
Yeah, that's another good example. If you look at the marketing point of view, okay, you could say we use no trackers or we don't use images on the website, but that's not going to fly. Mm-hmm. So you have to think about what am I gaining versus what am I spending. And obviously, what we should not do is stay away from it because it uses a lot of resources. And to say, okay, we lost the boat, we missed the train. We didn't act on anything because it simply consumes too much. What we try to do is to be mindful of what we do. If we post a meme, which is something that is in the habit of the data first, to post a Monday morning meme, we rarely make use of ChatGPT if we can find a suited image in another way. I'm a little bit scared of. So I certainly think we should invest. So I'm not saying we should not, but I see some companies that are drawing a lot of budget away from data implications and only focus on agents and LLMs. And I don't think that's valid either.
It's not sustainable.
There's a lot of value in the other stuff that we're doing in data as well. So obviously, this is the moment it's a little bit similar to the moment when the domain we became good at understanding pictures. 10 years ago, we were not really capable of understanding pictures very well. At a certain point, the technology was there with deep learning, and we were suddenly able to understand pictures, and then there was a big shift for the domain. Now we're suddenly able to create meaningful and good chatbots or conversational interfaces. And obviously, we should embrace that and learn to work with that. But it's not because of that extra capability that all the other stuff that you're doing is invalid. It's just another tool that we should work with.
On the contrary, I think we have a client that exactly what you say, heavily invested in AI and Gen AI and chatbots and stuff like that over the last 2 years, but they neglected the fundamentals. Like really just getting data together, making data available for business to use, creating standard insights. So all that AI was built on very shaky foundations. And I would even say it's a harsh statement, but that's a step back. Even it's not a small step forward; it's a step back.
If you interpret it in terms of confidence that you will get from the business, indeed, if you're building on shaky ground, you can easily go back to the period where they say, we don't trust anymore what's in there. So I think a lot of companies are realizing now that the foundation should be good, your governance should be good. But I think a smart data roadmap contains a balanced portfolio of projects that you want to work on, and a solid understanding of how that taps into your main business problems. and the conversational speech is an important opportunity, sometimes also a business challenge, but it's not the only thing you want to do in your company.
And if you say it like that, it's super obvious. Yet so many companies are struggling with it, right? The title of the podcast is The Data Playbook. And as part of your playbook, you should do exactly what you say. You should have a balanced portfolio of things you want to do, and it should be linked to business value, right? And that is a sentence that is so easy to say, yet it's so hard to do in practice, right? So I maybe want to make this very tangible. When you say we aim to bring sustainability to our projects, can you give an example, a concrete example of a project you did? Can I imagine like you built like ESG dashboards? Is that sustainability for you? Or what does a concrete sustainable project look like for you?
Well, ironically, the answer is that we don't always get too excited about the ESG dashboards, and maybe for people that understand the context, it's maybe not so surprising. But obviously, a number of companies are setting up a number of things because of compliance reasons.
They have to.
They have to.
Yeah.
So they have to have something, and whatever that is. We see them tingling sometimes or suggesting to include some parameters because they're beneficial and to ignore a number of other things to improve the dashboard a little bit. So it's not our core mission to do to build only CSRD reporting, but there's a lot of things that are good for the world in general. We've helped build an app, for example, where we did the visualization part related to absenteeism. So how should people deal with absenteeism? Can companies make sure that people remain connected and are able to step back into their jobs after burnout, for example? So a lot of what the HR domain is discovering around data is good for people. If we build a financial dashboard for an organization with a useful cause, like a government agency, and you allow organizations that have a positive benefit in the world to do more with limited funds, that is positive. So we think bigger than just typical sustainability projects. For example, I've had the fortune to work in my first quarter on a fraud detection system for a government agency. These are exactly the same systems that we applied for retailers and debt collection agencies. But if you're doing it in fraud detection related to grants, it suddenly becomes more purposeful, more purpose-driven, and so there's a lot of things that we could do. And that we are doing, and but no, it's not typically one solution that we want to push.
So if I can summarize that, you're saying you want to leave the world in a slightly better place after you've done your project. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we try to think about the concept that is important in Ikigai as well, in what is something that the world needs today. So if you would do this, would this indeed make the world a little bit a better place? Yes or no? And if you combine that with ambition, because if you want to do that, you want to be bigger, you want to have more impact, you want to grow as well. Obviously, you don't want to end at the end of your career where you said, "Yeah, I gave it all away." So we combine, and we're not hiding that. We combine an ambition to be profitable with the ambition to do something useful that the world.
It should be a win-win, right?
Exactly.
If you lose, then you cannot be successful long-term, right? So
exactly. It's a win-win for different parties. So you want the company to win, you want the employees to win, you want your clients to win, you want to care about the projects that they're doing, you want to create impact through those projects, you want to build a little bit the communities that you're in, and you want to do something that's good for the environment. And if you can combine some of those things together, it becomes much more interesting than if you go for one of these dimensions and ignore all the rest. And the good thing is, or the funny thing is, they all reinforce each other as well. We see the positive impact of thinking in a win-win way about these concepts.
Absolutely. So With that philosophy in mind, how do you decide which projects you engage on?
Well, we stole that part from Static. Or to frame it more correctly, we were inspired by Static because they in a short conversation we had, they said, yeah, we try to score our projects and clients based on 3 dimensions: a heart, the hands, and the head.
Okay.
So the heart means, do we feel it? Does it have indeed a positive contribution for the world? That is the first part that we discussed. The head is, does this make sense? So is this a rational decision to go for it? There's a lot of things that you could do that are beautiful for the world, but that would not make a lot of sense for us. Obviously, to be able to grow, we focus on clients that have a reasonable amount of data challenges. We will invest more in building relationships with clients that have a lot of problems. That's why we look at government agencies, for example, where we have close relationships. Because there's a lot of really interesting challenges that fall right into what we want to do. And it's through one partner that you can grow the relationship with.
Yeah.
So that's the head part. It has to make sense. And then the hands part is, do we have people that do that? So if they come to us, if we discover that at a really beautiful organization, there's a really nice project, but it's more about data engineering, we'll obviously come to you guys.
Keep doing that.
You're on our speed dial. Because it's not going to be for us. So do we have the people? Obviously, not everybody's free at every moment in time. It's consulting, so you want to be busy as well. So do we have the people to engage, or can we help this client in another way?
That's a difficult puzzle to make. Also for us, sometimes we see fantastic opportunities, but then the people we actually need to deliver on that, well, they're not available.
Yeah.
And they're not available for the coming 2 quarters.
Yeah, that's a tough thing in consulting, I think.
Yeah.
Sales and recruitment are 2 trains that need to run at the same time.
Yeah.
And if one is standing in the station, you're not making any progress.
Yeah.
And so indeed, for us at the Data Forest, it's not that hard with our focus and mission to find young people that say, yeah, I'm a clever guy, I can do a lot of interesting stuff, and I want to do something useful for the world. So the recruitment part is a little bit easier for us than the sales part, because we make life a little bit harder for us. We could be working still for a lot of other organizations that we don't target today. So you need to make sure that both are running at a reasonable speed. And yes, at sometimes you miss deals because either you don't have the people, or you have the people but you don't have the deal. That's true.
But that brings me maybe to the next question. How do you get people on board on this journey? Is it like a filter you apply when people want to join the Data Force? Like, this is what we stand for. If you like it, join us. If you don't like it, don't join us. Or did it also need convincing of the people currently at the Data Forest on how you want to work? How do you make sure people are on board of your projects?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for a team, a data team or a company, is to be very clear about the core stuff. And what do I mean with that is in that first quarter, with the whole team, we made a lot of progress on really writing down what is our purpose, what is our mission, what are our values. And we were 90% aligned. In most cases, we didn't dare to mention the word sustainability, or we didn't dare to put it out there, but the ideas were the same. And that is obviously because Michiel started the company with that idea. I want to do something profitable, and I want to do something good for the environment or for the world in general. And so, yes, we attract those people who believe in the same thing. So the more that we communicate about who we are, the more we attract similar people. And that was also the challenge that I had in my burnout 15 years ago. Or I'm not sure that I could call it a burnout, but in a difficult moment that I had 15 years ago, I had the ambition to do something for non-profit. And my 2 colleagues at that point, which is very fair, they said, okay, Geert, if you want to do it, we don't necessarily believe in the same goals, so why don't you do it in your spare time? And that was a very honest answer. And so it was not a driver of energy in the team. The driver of energy for that team is we can do fantastic things and we can do stuff that's really cool and that makes a lot of money for our clients, and we want to have impact in that way. That was the main driver, and so that's what we went. So I was not able or willing at that point to really push through my idea. And the reason why it works now is that we're fully aligned within that team on that idea.
Yeah. And so today, how far are you pushing this idea, this concept of sustainability? When do you consider it a success? Because I know that well, in Dutch you say is a straatje zonder eind. So it's a never-ending story. I think that's the expression. And you can always be more sustainable than you are today, right? You can always do better. So do you have some kind of line in the sand that you say, if we reach this and this point, we consider it to be a sustainable, successful project?
No, I think it's exactly about the opposite, about not having a line where you say and then we stop.
Okay.
It's about putting things on the table and trying to figure out how important is this and how will we change our position. So next quarter we're defining in more detail what do we mean with sustainable data products. It could mean that you mean high quality, that you do code reviews and stuff like that. So there's a number of concepts that are, again, in the back of our minds, but that we need to put on paper. And so we'll start to do that. But once that is done, that will continuously change as well. So we don't have necessarily an end goal of saying if we reach that point, we will be very happy and proud about it. No, well, it's a journey. Where you consider things that come on your path and where you try to make the right decision. But something that we were very specific about is also we will make mistakes. Yeah. At some point, we will discover that we've worked for a client that did exactly the wrong thing with our work. So there's a number of things that we are fully transparent on in the team, is that we know only what we know today. So if we engage in a project, we only do it based on what we know today. Yeah. And we're not investigators. We can figure out for a company or an organization, is this organization doing the right thing? But we're not going to spend double the project time on investigating that company, whether that's really true and whether all people really believe that that's fantastic. So we do what we can and we forgive ourselves if we make mistakes along the way. And I think that's an important part. So it's not about being right at the end of the line, I think, because we will have been wrong in some cases. But it's about your intention to do the right thing. I think that's more it.
If I can challenge you a bit, if I look at data leaders today, they have a lot of challenges. I know it's a cliche, but there's a lot more expectations from the business, what we talked about, Gen AI. So business wants to see more. It becomes harder to recruit the right talent because there's a war on talent. Well, I don't like the word, but it's hard to find the right talent, right? There's a lot of use cases, a lot of pressure to deliver. At the same time, you want to introduce governance. You have security, compliance that you need to deal with. You need budget that you need to manage. In that sense, a data leader today has already a lot on their mind, right? So how relevant is sustainability in that picture, you think? Do they really care?
I understand your question.
Yeah.
And I think I want to clarify. We're not doing this because we think it's the topic that is most top of mind within our target group of the average data manager. Mm-hmm. So you will have companies, organizations, data teams and other teams who care more about the topic and some who care less about the topic. Mm-hmm. So we're not aiming to convince, we're not feeling morally superior than others. We're not aiming to convince everybody to take this direction. But what we see is that we have a good conversation and a good fit with those that do care as well about more stuff than about making profit. And suddenly, in our introductory calls, we don't only push what we are doing, we also share some thoughts and progress and ideas about how we can put this in action. So it's becoming an interesting part of a discussion with clients rather than something that we want to use as an edge. And if the fit is not there, then so be it. I think a good part of strategy is also stepping away from things that are not going in the direction that you want to be moving.
As a sidetrack, someone taught me the word decidere last summer. So the word decision apparently comes from the Latin word decidere. I didn't know that. So, but decidere means if you have vines where you grow grapes, sometimes you need to cut off part of the branch of the vine. Not that there's no grapes on that branch, because those are the easy branches to cut, but there's not as many grapes as on other branches. And so exactly, strategy and decisions is more about what you decide not to do than decide what to do, right? Those are the hard decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like your train of thought there. So in a way, you say sustainability for us is not a forcing device, but it is something that we take with us in our journey towards our clients.
Well, it's a choice. What attracted me really to Michiel's story at the Data Forest, it comes from a sort of optimism. It doesn't come from frustration, because you could easily be frustrated with a lot of stuff that's happening today in the world. But it comes from a sort of optimism that we're capable people, able to do something useful. So, spent some time reading the book Moral Ambition also by Rutger Bregman. And that takes it into the extreme, to be really extremely committed to do everything right. So we have a more, let's say, moderate approach towards things. So we can be pragmatic as well.
Yeah.
But still, yes, I can do more with my talent than just marketing stuff and making sure that profitable companies become even more profitable through more marketing. So my talents serve also for other goals, and that's something that we want to positively embrace. And it's completely fine if there's people on a different path. That's not frustrating us at all. We're more enthusiastic about the people who are thinking the same directions.
It's like, be the change you want in this world, right? The Gandhi quote.
That's a big one.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, obviously, and it's related to having kids as well. With your kids, also, you're thinking about is this good for the world? So it's logical also that you sometimes take that consideration to work as well, I think.
Right. So if you zoom out a bit, Geert, you've been in data for 20 years. I think you're one of the few people in Belgium that can say that. So in those 20 years, why do data projects fail, in your experience?
In my experience, data projects fail most often because of the beginning and the end of the project. What do I mean with that? The beginning of the project, trying to really understand what it is that is really useful. So spending enough time and enough depth with the business question and really digging deep into and imagining a solution and trying to figure out if we would create that, would that really solve your problem, yes or no? So if you start off with the wrong project definition, that will cost you a lot of time and wasted energy and demotivation of doing that ever again. So I used to run project definition workshops, and I think that's still a good part of the solution, trying to make sure that you're on the same path and that you involve stakeholders, so the stakeholder management, which is also something that not every analyst is really in favor of spending a lot of time and energy on, but trying to make sure that you have the people aligned and that you do talk to the architects and the people that will have an opinion somewhere along the way, and that you don't shy away from these conversations. So project definition for me, and writing a good project charter could be something useful for the playbook, something to work on, is having a good standard template of what needs to be discussed before you lay your first brick, let's say. I really believe in that. And then the second thing we've touched on as well is adoption. making sure that people really understand what has been built. If you made sure that you were building the right thing, make sure you're not too shy about promoting what you've built. We see a lot of analysts that don't want to take the stage, and it doesn't climb high enough in the organization. So make sure you organize data stories and stuff like where you share, like many companies are doing, internal talks, success stories about what is being done. So don't be shy to push adoption of what you've been doing. Not a lot of data projects crash because of poor execution, and when that happens, obviously you need to talk about it. But that's not the majority of data projects, in my opinion.
So you would say most failures stem from human factors, not technology. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But also a lot of technology errors stem from human factors.
That is true. That's very true.
I think the part of the human is still very important in the equation, and I'm convinced that it will be even in the age of AI.
Yeah, same here. If you look at another aspect of your career, we talked a bit about it in the beginning, but you went from startup to scale up to corporate, now back to startup. And I'm curious if you can share a bit about that journey, and where did you feel the most comfortable, and what did you learn about that journey?
Well, it's obviously also confronting because I'm working on stuff that I think is more important. On the other hand, you're starting at the bottom of the scale again. So we were working on bigger projects in a larger organization. So to some extent, a large organization also has a large impact.
Yes.
And every situation has its advantages. I think in a lot of cases, you have to be careful not to run away too fast from a certain problem, to be able to deal with some stress and anxiety, and to stay in the difficult moment and work through it. I've seen different challenges, and some were technical, but most were human challenges. And I think I've been able to stay long enough so I learned from them.
Yeah.
And if you quit too easily, I think you don't go through the whole process. And so at one point in my career, I had to do the evaluations of 80 people that I've never met within 2 months, because that was the only system that would work. So that was extremely challenging, but we worked through it and it worked. These 80 people, not every single one of them was perfectly happy about their evaluation, but nobody quit their job, and I was able to help some of the people moving in the next step. So that's a challenge that I didn't choose for necessarily, but that I learned a lot from, and now it's a very different challenge again. Like I said before, trying to reach out and spread the word a little bit more. To reach the right people that are willing to work with the data forest is again very challenging for me, but it would be very wrong to walk away from that, because that's an area that I can again grow in, have more impact, to be more involved in the projects again, to be more involved in the clients again, to be more involved in sales again, which was something that I left for people that I consider much stronger in those parts than I consider myself. So
I see you enjoy the journey itself a lot. You enjoy the learning opportunities you get. You enjoy the coaching that you can give to others. That's what I notice. But did you ever had any doubt about starting all over again? Did you ever consider, like, maybe this is not for me? I'm going to do something completely out of data. I'm going to do something completely different. Was there any doubt before you joined the data forest?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and even 3 months into the journey is still relatively fresh. So obviously, with big changes, there are moments where you think, am I making things too hard or too easy? So obviously, yes. And indeed, when I stopped my previous job, I absolutely wanted to do something else than data.
Yeah.
Because I'm an even bigger fan of leadership, and certainly shared leadership. So leading not as a person, but leading with the whole team. And I was pretty convinced you can apply that in every context. And so I started to write a lot on LinkedIn about leadership, which is close to my heart. Yeah. And I had a lot of fantastic reactions. And I ended up drinking a lot of coffees and chai lattes with people in all different corners in Belgium. But in the end, yeah, my whole network and my whole career was in data. I don't have... I'm not reading a data book every evening. But I still have a passion for developing people with an analytical background, and I see what the domain is capable of doing. So definitely, if something else would have come my way on the 6 months that I was reading and thinking and reflecting and trying to calm down, that could have been a really nice other path. But I'm really not disappointed because there's enough of enthusiasm and of value to be delivered in data that I like as well. And if there's people that are more passionate about specific analytic techniques or specific coding techniques or whatever, then fantastic. And I can enjoy their enthusiasm and support them in their journey. So I don't have to be the guy that's passionate about everything in data either, to make sure that the team is running, that we get maximum out of the group.
All right. To wrap up, I have one question that I ask everyone that I interview. What is the biggest data lesson you've learned over the years?
The biggest data lesson is probably don't do it in your corner. When we started doing projects, we were pretty shy. And then I'm talking about the periods where I was coordinating student projects at university 20 years ago. We went very shy to the client and we were very humble. And we said, yeah, thank you for your problem. We love to work on a real problem. And then we disappeared for months. And then we came back with a solution full of stress, full of anticipation, that we were hoping that this was the exact thing that the person would be dreaming of, and hoping that we would shine on the stage. And it was only later that I realized that we were taking so much risk, and there was so little chance that we would exactly deliver what they dreamed of, because we were doing way too little of the interaction and the conversation that was needed to build something useful. So I'm an analytical profile. I work a lot with analytical profiles. And the biggest mistake is always not to talk soon enough. So if you have trouble, if you have a doubt, if you see that something is not working, my biggest conclusion is bring it to the table faster. Share your problems and your challenges as much as you share your successes. And an analyst is more comfortable to share something that has worked, or afterwards maybe share the struggles, than to share that in the middle of the storm. And that's exactly the moment where you need to find feedback. So the biggest lesson for me was include people in your thought processes earlier, so you allow a better outcome to be created, because you do it together.
All right. Thank you very much, Geert, for coming to our podcast. It was a pleasure having you. I learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, very much, Chris. You know, I look up to you just as much as you look up to me, because I feel a little bit uncomfortable about all the positive things you said. But I think it's a fantastic initiative, and I hope you do very well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.